that they gave me a raw deal because this industry is a monster. It's the same monster that these Me Too trying to tell you about. But they hate the monster for how it, and I hate that monster for how it eats. But my God, man, it's the same monster. When I quit the show, all my friends would say, well, up them, Dave, why don't you just do Chappelle's show at another network? Yeah. And why doesn't a slave run from one plantation to another plantation? Because the master over there might be nicer. My God, man, I was trapped. You know what? Tell you the truth. I've even thought about coming back and doing another Chappelle show. Well, but if I do...
Elon Musk and 50 Cent just cracked open a conversation that has the entire industry uneasy. And the biggest twist is this. Diddy isn't being framed as the final boss anymore. He's being framed as a distraction. If you've been staring at him like he's the end of the road, then according to this theory, you've been reading the wrong map the whole time. Because this moment isn't just about loud accusations or recycled headlines. It's about leverage, silence, and who actually controls the narrative when things start falling apart. Here's why this hit different. 50 Cent has been loud, aggressive, and public with his Diddy documentary, The Reckoning. He framed it as something nobody else in the industry had the courage to touch. His message was blunt. Silence doesn't make you innocent, it makes the entire culture look complicit. That's why he stepped into the mess head first, daring anyone to challenge him. But Elon Musk enters this picture from a completely different angle. Elon doesn't move like an entertainer, he moves like a systems guy. He owns X, formerly Twitter, which means he sits on years of private messages, deleted conversations, and behind the scenes communications between celebrities, politicians, executives, and power players. Not opinions, not vibes, but data, receipts, timelines, things that don't care about public image. That's why people are suddenly mapping this whole situation like a pyramid. At the bottom, you got the celebrity faces everyone recognizes, names like Jay-Z and Beyonce, massive influence, massive reach, but still public facing. In the middle, you got the gatekeepers, the people who decide who gets platforms, awards, forgiveness, and silence.
It's like the Diddy thing was like an Epstein type compromise deal where he had, whether he was doing it himself, conceivably, people want to think that he's attached to some intelligence agency or something like that. I think he's a gangster who made $1 billion and knew how to control people by compromising them. That's what I think. Whether or not he had help, I don't know. Whether or not he shared some of that information with people so they knew they had compromising stuff on people, I don't know. But clearly he was doing it for his own jollies too. There was something sick about it.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is that people in the music and entertainment industry had to know that Diddy was like abusing, kids basically. And yet they still fed him kids. And like, where's the accountability?
There had to be rumors. There had to be. They
had to know.
Yeah.
They had to know.
Cat Williams was talking about it on
exactly.
Yeah, on that podcast.
But like who's feeding him the kids,
Right. Yeah. And what videos do they have of these people where they're willing to defend him and they're willing to keep quiet about all this? Like how many people were compromised?
Yeah.
The whole thing is fucking crazy.
Crazy.
It's just crazy when because the nutty conspiracy theories is like, oh, there's a bunch of pedophiles in Hollywood. And you're like, come on, that sounds too kooky. And then you see like the Nickelodeon thing and all these
Oprah, Clive Davis, executives who don't just shape careers, they shape what stories survive. And then at the top, according to the theory gaining traction online, there's one unnamed force tying it together. Someone hiding in plain sight, not always visible, not always loud, but positioned where influence, image, and protection intersect. And this doesn't stop at studios or boardrooms. The conversation stretches into politics, philanthropy, and even religious spaces. 50 has been hinting at that crossover for months, suggesting the machine doesn't care what mask it wears as long as it keeps running. Before climbing any higher, here's the grounding point. The Diddy situation matters beyond hip-hop. This isn't a biography, this isn't nostalgia, and this isn't fan service. This is about power dynamics. 50's documentary wasn't framed as entertainment, it was framed as exposure. His core argument was simple and dangerous at the same time. If everyone knew something was wrong and nobody said anything,
how does Jay-Z sit down with Gayle King and she not ask him one question about the intersection between him and Aaliyah and Robert Kelly? This is insane that people keep refusing. I've been screaming, not just Diddy, but Diddy and Jay-Z are monsters. Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, Robert Kelly, Sean Combs have one person in common professionally and privately. Sean Carter, This has been a fist of tyranny that has been punching through. That changes now, Sean. You have no choice. That Dream Hampton was being financed and ran by Sean Carter. They were able to go and get all of these witnesses because he was there with Robert Kelly.
Then the culture itself becomes part of the problem. Now here's where the story turns darker. One of the biggest claims circulating isn't about music at all, it's about control. Commentators like Jaguar Wright and Gene Deal have spoken for years about alleged hidden cameras in Diddy's properties. Not one or two, but allegedly hundreds. The framing isn't that they were there for fun or security, but for leverage, insurance footage. Material that doesn't need to be used publicly to be powerful. The idea is simple and terrifying. If someone believes you have footage that could destroy their reputation, you don't have to threaten them. You don't have to speak. Obedience becomes automatic, silence becomes survival, and now the rumor circulating is that these recordings, whether real or exaggerated, are being quietly moved, secured, or negotiated around as pressure rises. Big names are allegedly panicking, not because of headlines, but because of what might exist off camera. This is where Elon Musk changes the entire equation, because Elon doesn't need to speculate about vibes.
Think about this. Sean Carter is responsible for enacting Hype Williams to put Aaliyah on a faulty plane, to move her out the way as punishment for rejecting him, and so he could level up Beyonce, who was struggling. Let's just say allegedly that happened. Now I want you to think about 106th and Park with Mary J. Blige. Free, who is a victim of Sean Carter.
Yeah.
Mary J. Blige, who is a victim of Sean Combs, are sitting there talking about the death of Aaliyah amongst each other. Think about that. You got a Diddy victim, you got a Jay-Z victim, and you got a superstar gone. They know what happened, and yet they had to sit there and have that conversation like they didn't know who did it.
He controls infrastructure. He sits on the digital backbone where private conversations lived for years. When Elon sat down with Joe Rogan, he didn't make a formal accusation, but he pointed out something deeply uncomfortable: the gap between what people said publicly and what they didn't say when it mattered. The implication wasn't that Diddy was part of some movie-style spy agency. The implication was more grounded and more disturbing, that he was a ruthless operator who figured out how to compromise people, not through mystique, but through access. And once people were compromised, the silence wasn't loyalty, it was fear. That's why the conversation keeps looping back to one ugly question.
That's suing Tony Busby. Spiro is a partner, and Alex Spiro is Jay-Z's personal lawyer.
Oh, so it's probably Jay-Z then that's doing the suing.
Of course they've used Kevin's name,
Why
but
do
it
they-
ain't Kevin. Why is Alex Spiro popping up everywhere?
What do you think is going on in Hollywood right now? What are you hearing? Because I'm hearing
Mass panic. Mass
Everyone-
panic.
So because no one's talking publicly.
No, it
But
can't.
That's why they came up with the story. Well, you know, there's a party inside the Diddy party. And I went to the first party, but I left early. I never made it to Diddy After Dark.
There were public relations teams right after Diddy got arrested running around telling everyone to say that.
Of course.
The question is this. If all you went to was the first party and you didn't know anything about the After Dark, why would you say, I left early? Why wouldn't you just say you left when the party ended?
Exactly.
Because how would you know
That
there
the-
was another party
Exactly.
if you weren't informed?
Exactly.
If you went to the Diddy party and nothing happened and it was the first party, your speech wouldn't be, oh, well, I only went to the first party. I
Right.
didn't go to the after party. You wouldn't say that because you wouldn't have known about
Exactly.
it. You would say, I don't know what anybody's talking about. I went to Diddy's party. It was a white party. It was dancing. It was wild. But at the end, we all went home.
Right.
That's not what y'all are saying.
Nope.
You're saying, I didn't go to the second party. I only went to the first. The only thing you're proving is that you're hiding being there
Yeah.
because you wouldn't have known about another
Exactly.
party.
If someone was that close and never warned anyone, what does that mean? Either they genuinely didn't know, which many find hard to accept, or they knew something and chose silence. And if they chose silence, then the next question becomes unavoidable. Why? Fear, protection, career preservation, image control, or protecting someone higher up the chain. That's where the pyramid theory gains momentum. Level 1 is Jay-Z and Beyonce, not because they're being accused of crimes here, but because of proximity and influence. People ask why certain questions never get asked, why interviews stay comfortable, why some intersections like industry relationships connected to past scandals never get pressed. It's not about guilt by association, it's about selective curiosity. How does someone sit across from a journalist and never face the hard follow-ups everyone else gets? That inconsistency fuels suspicion whether it's fair or not, and this is where the conversation becomes dangerous territory, because the theory being pushed isn't that Diddy is the only problem, it's that Diddy might be the most visible symptom of a system that protects itself, a system that decides who gets canceled, who gets forgiven, and who gets ignored. When people start connecting names like Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, Robert Kelly, and Sean Combs, they aren't saying they're identical cases, they're pointing out a shared pattern, long timelines, open rumors, quiet circles, and institutions that move slower than the damage being done. That's why this moment feels different. It's not driven by one documentary or one podcast clip. It's driven by the collision of exposure, technology, and collapsing trust. Social media didn't create the suspicion, it amplified it. And that's why Elon Musk matters here. Not because he's a hero, but because he sits in a position that bypasses traditional media filters. If platforms hold private histories that contradict public narratives, the balance of power shifts instantly. Sean Carter's name has been moving through this conversation like a slow, heavy punch that people felt coming but didn't know when it would land.
Favorite memory working with Diddy?
You know, personally, I've got to tell you, he really is a major star in this film tonight. He's his spokesman all the way through. I met him before I ever knew of him. I met him when he was 21 years old. And when we met, you know, he played me Craig Mack Flavor in Your Ear. He played me 3 cuts from the forthcoming Notorious B.I.G. album. And we talked for hours and hours about music. And I poured into his dream. And I financed Bad Boy Records. And we had an incredible run, an incredible period.
For years, his influence has been described as untouchable, protected by success, wealth, and legacy. But according to voices like Jaguar Wright, that protection is cracking, and the pressure that's been building behind the scenes is finally pushing outward. Jaguar Wright stepped into dangerous territory during her interview with Piers Morgan, making claims she herself said she was not supposed to say out loud. She spoke about Jay-Z, Diddy, and what she framed as deeply rooted industry connections that go far beyond music. Almost immediately, people online started saying the episode became difficult to find, clipped strangely, or quietly buried. Whether that's true or not, the perception alone was enough to fuel speculation. One question she raised has been circulating for years, and it keeps resurfacing because no one has answered it directly. How does Jay-Z sit across from Gayle King on a major network and never get pressed on long-running rumors, industry relationships, or uncomfortable intersections? Jaguar didn't soften her language at all. She described Jay-Z and Diddy as figures whose influence has weighed on the industry for decades, using words that shock people not because they were proven, but because they were said so openly. Then there's the Aaliyah theory, the one that refuses to disappear no matter how many years pass. Jaguar went further than most commentators ever dare to go, suggesting Jay-Z had personal motives connected to who benefited after Aaliyah's tragic passing. To be clear, none of this is proven, and no official findings support those claims. But what keeps the theory alive online isn't evidence, it's silence. Jay-Z has never directly addressed it, and in internet culture,
as Cat Williams calls out Bishop T.D. Jakes, and watch as T.D. Jakes and Geno Jennings' response.
I came in this business saying I was going to expose. When I talked about Michael Jackson, when I talked about R. Kelly, they canceled me for these things because why would you talk about another black dude? Race is not where the line is drawn. It's God's side and the other side. And we don't care nothing about the other side. Period. All of these big dick deviants is all catching hell in 2024. It's up for all of them. It don't matter if you Diddy or whoever you is, T.G. Jakes, any of them. All lies will be exposed. That's all.
Silence doesn't read as neutral. It reads like a choice. Online discussions then spiral into hypotheticals, prefaced constantly with allegedly, as people replay old TV moments with new eyes. One moment that gets brought up often is 106 in Park, where Mary J. Blige sat on stage discussing Aaliyah's death. Viewers now point out the emotional weight of that scene, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Mary J. Blige has spoken openly in the past about struggles with powerful industry figures, while Diddy has faced his own allegations. Fans now look back and say the silence felt heavy, like people navigating a conversation carefully, knowing how dangerous honesty could be. That reinterpretation might not be fair, but once an audience starts connecting dots, fairness takes a back seat to narrative momentum. You got a legendary artist gone too soon, surrounded by figures whose names are now attached to controversy, and people sitting on camera acting like they're strangers to the deeper story.
Jakes was at a Diddy party. There could only be two reasons: money or sex. That's all that happens at Diddy parties: money and sex.
Cassie has turned over substantial amounts of evidence to the feds. I'm told that after Cassie had a long conversation with Blank, I have to protect this person. They're going through a lot right now. And her lawyers, she finally was convinced to give up the videotapes and audio recordings that contain.
To viewers today, that doesn't feel accidental, it feels controlled. Then another detail made people start side-eyeing everything even harder. When Diddy's legal problems escalated and lawsuits began stacking up, one name instantly raised eyebrows online: Alex Spiro. Spiro is widely known as Jay-Z's personal attorney. Reports and commentary suggested his presence began appearing around parts of the Diddy legal orbit, and that alone set off alarms for conspiracy-minded viewers. The question people started asking wasn't legal, it was narrative. Why is Jay-Z's lawyer suddenly being mentioned in conversations adjacent to Diddy's situation? Why does the same name keep popping up? Again, that doesn't prove coordination or wrongdoing, but it feeds the perception that powerful people move quietly, legally, and strategically when pressure rises. At the same time, commentators started claiming there was mass panic behind closed doors in Hollywood.
Diddy and TD Jakes.
Man, what I think about it is this, when I grew up in the church, the sinners was not supposed to have the same atmosphere with the saints. You have to be able to separate the two. So I'm looking at him as a saint going to a party that ain't nothing but sin, drinking, maybe fornication, man on man, woman on woman, he on she. But maybe he'd have to lay some hands on somebody. Maybe he'd have to save some souls. I know he got a contract with Revolt, so I'm just like, it's just real strange that he would be found at any kind of Diddy party or any kind of place with Diddy unless it's in a business atmosphere.
So why do you think he was going to these parties?
I think that he's going to the Diddy parties, bruh. If he's going, well, we know he's going to the Diddy parties, and I know that I know what usually happens at the Diddy party, or when we told this happened at the Diddy parties. Maybe he needs to see it for himself, man. Maybe he needs to go there and really be involved in some things that could help save some individuals while they go into those parties.
Not public panic, but quiet panic. PR teams allegedly scrambling, messaging getting coordinated, and talking points suddenly sounding very similar. You started hearing the same phrase repeated again and again. I went to the first party, but I left early. That line became suspicious to people who analyze language for a living, because if someone truly didn't know about anything beyond a normal party, why specify first party at all? Why clarify something no one asked? Viewers argued that you only explain the existence of another event if you already knew it existed. This is where internet logic takes over. If you genuinely thought nothing strange happened, the response would be simple. I went, it was a party, and everyone went home. But instead, the phrasing keeps separating events into layers, which only raises more questions in the eyes of the audience. The theory people push is straightforward, even if controversial. Control the narrative before more names get pulled into the spotlight. Because if Diddy ever speaks freely, without filters, it wouldn't just affect him. It could pull powerful people into uncomfortable daylight, whether they belong there or not. That's why the conversation keeps circling back to Jay-Z's rise. You can't talk about that era without mentioning Big L. Big L played a major role in opening doors early, connecting Jay-Z to Dame Dash and helping shape that Brooklyn network. There were reportedly talks happening about Big L's future, negotiations and movement toward bigger opportunities. Then suddenly, Big L was killed in a drive-by in Harlem. The case remains unsolved to this day. No arrests, no closure, just questions. Jaguar Wright and others have pointed out the timing, suggesting Big L's death was the first in a series of mysterious endings that seem to clear pathways for others to rise. Is that proof of anything? No. But once people start lining up timelines and comparing who benefited, who disappeared, and who stayed silent, the pattern starts feeling uncomfortable to them, and discomfort is enough to keep a theory alive in the public imagination. This entire discussion exists in the space between facts and fear, between what's proven and what's suspected, between what's said publicly and what's whispered privately. No courts have confirmed these claims, and allegations are not convictions, but the reason this conversation won't die is because power and silence tend to travel together, and once an audience believes silence is strategic, every quiet moment becomes louder than any denial. Now we move up to level 2, and this is where the conversation stops being about fame and starts being about leverage. This is the layer people say never shows up in headlines because it doesn't need to. At this level, influence isn't loud, it's quiet, indirect, and surgical. Two names dominate this part of the discussion every time it resurfaces: Oprah Winfrey and Clive Davis. With Oprah, the criticism doesn't come from a single event, it comes from proximity. Photos, public appearances, shared stages, and years of association with powerful figures like Harvey Weinstein, even while rumors were already circulating quietly in the industry. The debate isn't about whether she committed wrongdoing, it's about expectation. Someone with that level of cultural authority could have forced a spotlight early if they chose to. And when that spotlight never came, silence started getting interpreted as protection. That's where the tension lives. In this space, people don't read silence as neutrality, they read it as strategy. Oprah's platform wasn't just big, it shaped conversations, reputations, and redemption arcs. One interview could soften a scandal, one endorsement could rebuild a career, and one absence could quietly erase a story from the mainstream. That's why critics frame her power as quiet power. The kind that doesn't need viral moments, because one phone call can determine who gets booked, who gets sidelined, and who suddenly becomes difficult. Then there's the South Africa school controversy, which keeps getting pulled back into this conversation. Early allegations, internal investigations, people fired, statements issued, and official explanations delivered. On paper, it was addressed, but critics argue parts of the story never fully added up, not legally, but emotionally and structurally. The question they keep asking isn't was it handled, but was everything seen? And when powerful institutions investigate themselves, doubt never fully disappears. Add resurfacing photos, resurfacing rumors, and old interviews being replayed with a new lens, and Oprah's name keeps coming back into discussions about oversight, influence, and selective vision, not because she's accused of crimes, but because people question what someone with that much access chooses not to see. Then comes Clive Davis, and this is where the temperature rises again. Clive is not a background figure, he's a cornerstone. Arista Records, decades at the top, careers launched, careers saved, and careers quietly shelved. That's exactly why people don't treat him like noise. When someone has been at the center of the industry for that long, patterns start to matter. Suge Knight has claimed for years that Clive and Diddy weren't just mentor and protege. He framed it as something deeper than business, something personal, something structural. No public proof has ever been presented, and those claims remain allegations, but they keep getting recycled because they fit a broader narrative people already believe. Diddy didn't rise alone, and when reporters have tried to press Clive about Diddy over the years, viewers point to moments where Clive appeared uncomfortable, deflected questions, or redirected the conversation. Again, that's not proof of anything criminal, but once clips exist, the internet treats them like tells, pauses get analyzed, tone gets dissected, body language becomes a storyline. Then there's the Whitney Houston angle, another chapter the internet refuses to let go of. Public debates keep circling her final days, the people around her, the business pressures, and whether the official narrative explains everything. Family comments over the years have fueled suspicion, and the online question keeps coming back sharper every time. How does someone have decades of heavy rumors around them and never face lasting consequences? That's where the fall guy theory enters. A lot of people believe Diddy is absorbing the heat while the real gatekeepers remain untouched, operating above the level where headlines can reach. The idea isn't that Diddy is innocent, it's that he's convenient, loud enough to focus on, controversial enough to blame, and visible enough to protect the quieter power centers. Then the conversation jumps again straight to the top of the pyramid, and this is where even longtime observers get uncomfortable. The name that shocks people the most isn't an executive or a mogul, it's a pastor, Bishop T.D. Jakes. That's the name 50 Cent has kept poking for months, never fully explaining why, just keeping it in the mix. The theory being pushed is simple but heavy. If influence reaches the pulpit, then this isn't just a celebrity problem, it's an ecosystem problem. The framing goes like this: Diddy didn't just need money or fame, he needed legitimacy, respectability, someone trusted to stand near him and make him look clean by association. That's where some people claim T.D. Jakes fits into the picture, not as proof of wrongdoing, but as part of a protection layer. A respected spiritual authority provides a moral cover without saying a word. That's how the theory is framed. People also point to how TD Jakes was used in the documentary Rollout. Clips placed at specific moments appearing right after disturbing testimonies. Viewers noticed timing that felt deliberate, not accidental. In one segment, when allegations were described in detail, the footage cut to Jake speaking about love, energy, and spiritual struggle. To many viewers, that felt like a signal, not a coincidence. Then Cat Williams got pulled back into the conversation. He had said publicly that 2024 would be the year everything gets exposed, no matter who you are. The internet treated that like a forecast, replaying it every time another name surfaced. And when Cat mentioned religious figures alongside entertainers, it only fueled speculation. When TD Jakes was confronted publicly about his proximity to Diddy, his response is what made the moment explode. He didn't issue a clean denial. He told people to keep it moving, and then added language about repentance and forgiveness. To him, that may have sounded theological. To the public, it sounded evasive, especially when he followed it by saying he didn't even need to repent over this. That distinction is what triggered the backlash. To critics, it didn't sound like innocence, it sounded like deflection, wrapped in spiritual authority. Jaguar Wright poured fuel on the fire, claiming that if a pastor was ever around those environments, it only pointed to two motives in her view: money or access. She framed those spaces as leverage zones, not social gatherings. She went further, claiming there's video and audio circulating, footage that powerful people never wanted connected to their names. No proof has been released publicly, no tapes have been confirmed. But once the public believes receipts exist, the fear isn't the rumor itself, it's the possibility of evidence. Jaguar also claimed multiple men have come forward privately with stories they believe connect TD Jakes to that circle. Again, these remain allegations, not verified facts, but they keep spreading because they match the same pattern people say they've been pointing out the entire time. Power protects power until it can't. Gene Deal added his own angle, questioning why a religious leader would even be in proximity to parties people describe as anything but clean. He framed it as hard to explain unless you're either endorsing the environment or participating in it. He floated the idea that tapes could surface, and when they do, speculation would turn into confrontation. That's the real threat hanging over everything right now. Not opinions, not debates, proof, or at least the belief that proof exists somewhere, locked away, waiting for the wrong moment to drop. Now widen the lens even more. This doesn't stop at music or entertainment. When Elon Musk sat down with Joe Rogan, they weren't talking celebrity gossip, they were talking power networks. Why high-level names move the way they move, why fear of exposure shapes behavior more than morality ever could. Elon's framing wasn't political, it was structural. Fear of exposure, fear of what happens when the wrong doors open. Rogan brought up other elite names and asked if they seemed uncomfortable. Elon's answer was short and telling, yes. Then they compared the structure to an Epstein-style compromise model, not saying the cases are identical, but highlighting the mechanism. Once you capture someone in a compromising position, you don't need to argue with them. You don't need loyalty, you control them. That's the core of this entire pyramid theory. Not fame, not talent, control. And once you see it that way, a lot starts making sense. Why certain people never speak, why certain stories vanish, why certain names stay protected no matter how loud the noise gets. Dave Chappelle explained it differently, but the message landed that same. He described the industry as a trap, not just contracts, but psychological and reputational control. When people asked why he didn't just take his shows somewhere else, he compared it to running from one plantation to another. Different masters, same chains. If someone with that level of success felt boxed in, people ask what that says about everyone else trying to survive inside the machine. So now it's on you. Do you think this pyramid theory actually holds weight? Or is this just patterns being forced together because trust in the industry is gone? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want more deep dives into stories mainstream coverage keeps dancing around, hit like and subscribe. And if your comment adds real insight, we'll pin the best ones. So now it's on you. Do you think this pyramid theory actually holds weight, or is this just patterns being forced together because trust in the industry is gone? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want more deep dives into stories mainstream coverage keeps dancing around, hit like and subscribe. And if your comment adds real insight, we'll pin the best ones.